Begin. Okay, so one of the reasons I wanted to kind of talk about Hecate, or Hecate is how I pronounce it. I have seen it pronounced Hecate or Hecate. In I think any or all of those could be correct, but Hecate is how I first heard it, and so that is how I will pronounce her name. Um, but the reason I decided to do a class on this is, one, I've had some personal experiences with this goddess over my spiritual journey. And it was really interesting actually when she kind of cropped up again for me, and I wanted to do some, put together this class. And then I went back into my notes from years ago when I was starting this process, and then realized, like, oh, I've been here before. She's been around before, and I was finding kind of these connections. And so it has a personal meaning to me, but also I wanted to share it because she's so diverse, and her wheelhouse, or her reach in the spiritual realms is so diverse that I think she lends to her energy to a lot of different topics and ideas. So hopefully that will be helpful for you all if you decide to connect with her. So she has many, many titles, and we're going to learn about, I think, to me, she feels unique from other gods and goddesses in her diversity, and the expanse of where her web reaches and all of the realms that she is a part of. But she is called Torchbearer, of the Ways, Key Bearer, Child's Nurse, Light Bearer, Companion, Before the Gate, Guardian, Three-Bodied, of Three Ways, Evil Averting, Protecting Within, and the Preceder and Follower. So in references to her through many Greek writings, but there are sources of her actually in other cultures as well, she has many, many, many titles. And so to start, I use a couple words that I don't think come up super often. So, and I might not even be saying this right, but chthonic is a descriptor of her. She is a chthonic goddess, and connected with chthonic deities. And that is anything that is concerning, belonging to, or inhabiting the underworld. And she is also a liminal goddess. So this is relating to a transitional or an initial stage of a process, or occupying a position at or on both sides of a boundary or a threshold. So the idea of being at the threshold, of being at the gate, of being in multiple places, the connection with the underworld, but also other areas, is a constant when we're looking at Hecate. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history and her origins. So the very first traces of her worship are found in Asia Minor. And though the first literary references of her don't happen until the 8th century BCE, there's a lot of information showing that her worship is likely continued or likely began significantly earlier than those first traces. But I'll talk about that in a bit. So she's seen first in the 8th century. There's another reference to her in the 7th century. This is, BC. So long time ago. But then as word spread through the 6th and then 5th century, in the 5th century, she is widely known and widely worshipped. Temples to her all across Greece, and references to her in Turkey and in Egypt, so across the Middle East and into Northern Africa. So interestingly, some of her earliest images, or the earliest images that are attributed to Hecate, she's flanked by lions, which hints at a connection to the Middle East or these Middle Eastern origins. Lions are a common feature in Middle Eastern deities. Also, in many of the stories, Hecate's father is Perses, which means destroyer in Greek, but it also means Persian, which adds to this Middle Eastern connection. It's funny of like that it is this external cultural source that is getting pulled in, and also, I guess, not surprisingly, but interesting that the outsider is the destroyer, and yet they take some of that culture and incorporate it into this Greek pantheon. And also, we'll see that Hecate gets closely linked with Artemis, and a lot of times it seems that they are confused. So Artemis might be called, but there are clear symbols that show that it's actually Hecate that's being referenced. And Artemis in early depictions is also flanked by large cats. So just something to think about, that there are these links to her being earlier than the Greeks, and being worshipped in areas outside of that. She becomes prominent in Greek religion, as I said, in the 5th century, but it seems that she is ancient, more ancient than that. Another feature in her origins that's really interesting, that gives a sense of her being worshipped outside of Greece, is that very early on, people would sacrifice dogs to her. She's associated with dogs, in particular black dogs, and animal sacrifice was very common. But in Greece, it would be cows, pigs, sheep, goats. Dog was not part of that normal sacrificial repertoire, but it was, again, in other Middle Eastern faiths. So Hecate being linked to the Greek gods and also having dog sacrifices anomalous. And we'll get into a little more of that afterwards. Another link to her outside of Greece and earlier worship are these links to Egypt, because Hecate is seen with animal heads, which is clearly an Egyptian attachment. And though Hecate is often seen as a woman, the use of her female body with animal heads in single form or in triplicate, because she is a triple goddess, continues well into the future, when there were no other Greek gods that had those animal associations. So even up past the 5th century, when people are still worshiping her, she would be seen with those animal forms, and no other Greek god or goddess had anything like that. So it's kind of conjecture, but at the same time, it feels like she was rooted in these other cultures and kind of brought into the fold. So she's most often attributed to be the goddess, to be the daughter of Astera, who was a goddess of prophetic dreams. Hecate is also linked to dreams and nightmares, and linked to the night sky and stars, which are also reminiscent of Hecate. But later on, it's really interesting that Hecate is then been said to have been the daughter of Zeus, or the daughter of Demeter, or the daughter of Nyx, and she is pulled into the company and the kind of combined worship with Hermes, Apollo, Demeter, and Persephone very often. So there's kind of this shift that seems like it's trying to link her more firmly into the Greek pantheon. And as her following increases, then it's like that they worked to then make her more Greek, if that makes sense. So in the very earliest, there were more connections to these outside sources, and then as she kind of grew in renown and greater worship, the stories kind of shifted to be like, she's been ours the whole time. which I just thought was kind of interesting. So she has lots of associations. So as I said, the chthonic deities or deities of the underworld, she's connected to Hermes, Hades, Persephone. But what really stands her apart is that she is also linked to earth, heaven, and the sea. All right. And she is just unlike most, or maybe any, I can't think of a single god or goddess that has the ability to go to all of these places. She is a part of every world, and she's accepted and respected in every world. So as the stories of her kind of spread, like she is comfortably a keeper in the underworld and holds the keys to lead people into the underworld, and also has the ability to unlock the door to the Elysium Fields, which is heaven and paradise. And she alone has that power. She's associated with Zeus and other sun gods because she is light bringer and fire bringer and torchbearer. She's associated with the moon and other moon goddesses because she is of the night and has that dark connection to the underworld, and also, again, that glowing specter of star or moon to light the way in night places. She's connected to Demeter and the earth, and spends, there are stories of her being in her cave, gathering herbs, being, creating medicines and potions and spells. And then she's also connected to Poseidon and the sea. And so as I've kind of dug into this, I just find it so interesting that in some ways you might think like, oh, she's kind of just like the bag of anything. Like she's just this goddess that they're just like throwing things at. Like, we need someone who can take care of that. Like, oh, we'll give that to Hecate. And so she's a really strange amalgam of all of these powers and attachments. But to me, that speaks to it speaks to her power and her position. And also, to me, feels like increases kind of like that ancient energy. She's rooted in so many things as to be kind of like the goddess. And that's just my feeling. That's that's not, research that I found, but because of all of those pieces, she really has this sense of almost being the goddess. And then over time, and all of these cultural things picking up these pieces and then kind of creating this jack of all trades in deity form. And I just find that so fascinating that she is so interconnected with things. And to me, that speaks to a great amount of power. And also doesn't surprise me that a lot of people in a variety of spiritual faiths feel they have a deep connection to her. So I got a little off track on my notes here, just getting excited about Hecate. So she is linked to all of these places. Also, again, in that kind of like complex nature, over time, a lot of goddesses were assimilated into Hecate. So either there were a long list of names, apart from the ones that I already gave, that were just aspects of Hecate, or because they shared those pieces, she consumed all of those smaller energies, and then she became known to cover all of those things. She's often equated to other goddesses: Diana, Selene, Artemis, Isis, Persephone, either working in tandem with them, or, as I said, almost being mistaken for. And I'll talk about some of those specifics with Selene and Artemis on kind of how it seems like that might have just been a misnomer, and that it was the story was linked to Hecate. So her biggest ties though are to Demeter and Persephone. Many Demeter temples had their own sanctuaries dedicated to Hecate. Hecate would be at the gate to those temples, and these are tied to what was called the Eleusinian mysteries. Eleusis, I think I'm saying that right, was basically an ancient Vatican city. It was a city, it was a spiritual center where everybody went to learn about these greater and lesser mysteries. They would participate in mystery cults, they were worshiping deities, they were exploring spiritual realms, and this is the place you would go to really dedicate yourself to that spiritual undertaking and learning more. And Demeter, Persephone, and Hecate are all tied and were all part of a mystery cult together. And so those mystery cults and that spiritual city was in use, and worship was happening in those temples 700 years earlier than the first literary reference to Hecate. So though there is no direct correlation, it's likely that Demeter's name is mentioned. We know how tied in Hecate is into that story. And so even though she isn't worshipped by name, that worship is growing, or was around significantly earlier than her boom of popularity later on. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or anything so far? I'm kind of giving a lecture right now.
Well, so if she has all of these identities and they seem like they spread over a big area, heaven sees, the night, the gate, all of that. If you were to call upon her energy, what would it actually be for?
So I have, yes, absolutely. So I have kind of a list. She is called on for so many things, which is why I think that the idea of her kind of just being this like overarching, in my mind, just this goddess energy, because she is reached out for a variety of things. However, main things would be, her main things are the torch, the key, the sword. So she is to light your path when you are lost. She is the key to open doors that are closed to you. And she is the cutter of cords. So she's the cutter of the umbilical cord at birth. She is the cutter of the cord of death at the end of your life. And she is removing the things that bind you. So it's so powerful because she walks the ways and she is the in-between. So when we say she was called on for protection because she is the guardian at the gate, she's also that preceder and follower aspect. In the story, she and Helios are the only gods who hear when Persephone is abducted and brought to the underworld by Hades. That also links to a lot of her power because no other god or goddess was aware that this was happening, even though Persephone is like screaming out for help. Hecate is up in her cave, but she knows that something happened. And in that continuing story, she precedes Persephone every year when she has to return to the underworld, to Hades, for the third of the year for winter. And she is the follower of Persephone when she leads her out of the underworld when spring returns. So it's this idea that she is the in-between, she is the guardian, she's watching her back when she's leading her out and protecting her from danger. And she's leading the way, protecting her from danger as they go into the underworld. So I would say the most common things that you would reach out to her for are those inner journeys of things that are hidden from you, things that when you feel in darkness and you need that light, when something is confusing and locked away, that she is the key to open up that path to see where you need to go. Or also, she is going to cut away those things that bind you that no longer serve. But so much of her energy, this is one thing that I kind of made a note of. I think a thing that I find so interesting about her is she's not like a goddess of love and light. She is very gray. So there are many times where she is she is Brimo, which is terrifying to behold, is one of her titles. So she's this dread goddess, like, do not cross her. Like the ultimate karma of like, do not hurt her loved ones, don't deceive her, because the repercussions of that are mighty. So there were curses and spells where people would invoke her to bind people from harm, to call criminals to justice, to return stolen property, that she was the voice of just vengeance. But she is also the light. She's also, this saffron cloaked goddess of heaven. She is that light bearer, and a goddess that would lovingly care for you and guide you, and she's also this multiple aspect of, sometimes she's that light maiden, and sometimes she's the mother, and sometimes she's the crone. And so to me, I would call her gray because she is like this balance. And another thing about calling on her, which I have read, like other people connecting to her had found this to be true, that, what did I write out? That she will often obscure her own power and call us forward to reveal our own things. So it's like, she's here, she's the guide, she is helping along, but she doesn't give you the answers. She is just opening the way for you to find your own way. So it feels very much that that her energy isn't about kind of like this rescue, where she just tells you, like, she isn't revealing the answers to you, but it's more about almost like that tough love of a parent, of like, I'm going to guide you, and also you need to make your own choices and find that path for yourself. So clear the way. I want to make it a little bit easier for you so you can find this, but also this is on you. And the fact that her energy can, that she is that kind of, like I said, that just vengeance and anger and terror, for anyone who slights her, and then this like guiding, loving light, is just such an interesting balance, because so often, like especially in these old stories, the deities are one or the other. It's like good guys and bad guys, or not even, but it's like it is vengeance and like the darkness and the connection to the underworld, and then, or it's like the sun and earth and these higher things, and she is all of them. And just in these writings, how she comes around is just so diverse. So in one reference, she is tender-hearted Hecate, brightly coiffed daughter, and in another, she is Brimo Trimorphous, terrifying three form.
Sounds like a woman to me.
Yeah. So this actually is perfect. So when I was talking about her being this triple goddess, the bearer of keys, torches, swords, those are common, right? She's lighting the path, she's opening doors, and she's cutting those things that bind you, which is where her child's nurse title comes in, because she would be called upon in childbirth of like this safe passage into life. And then she is also that person that is guiding you out. right? So that when you pass on, that she is waiting in the path to lead you where you need to go. And maybe that is some realm of the underworld, maybe that's heaven, or maybe in life it is just the next path that you are going to see, that next branch, or next journey of your life, that she's the one that is waiting there. And I just love that idea. Shrines to her would be found at the outside of the city gates, also at the front door of people's homes, and that she is on both sides of things. She's evil averting, she's pushing out anything that is negative from you, and while also like bringing you forward in your own journey. So she isn't the idea that she isn't bound to the underworld, that she's welcome and respected in all realms, again, just feels different. It feels more powerful and definitely unique to so many other gods and goddesses. So I talked a little bit about Persephone being kidnapped, about how this kind of shows that Hecate has these keener senses and perception of unseen things that is also really different from other deities, which I think makes sense why so many people worshipped her. And as this word gets around of like, and people actively connecting with her energy. So when you think about, it's funny, you can talk about it as a history lesson, but people genuinely believing in these gods and goddesses, actively having a spiritual life, going to places like Eleusis and working to make connections and, become priestesses of her faith and commune with her. It's just not surprising to me that she would have such a great following, and that still she has that power, right? That people still want to connect to that energy. And for me, I wouldn't think about as gods and goddesses, like, I guess, I would say I believe in Hecate. Like, I believe that that's real, that her presence is real, and that I can have an actual connection to her, like other things in spirit. But in my mind, I might not think of gods and goddesses so much as like energy that exists, right? Just when we connect with any spirit, if you're going to the lower world and making a connection with an animal spirit, or journeying, going to higher realms and connecting with angels, all of those energies are around and you have access to them. And she is just she's just who you would call in for certain things. Like I might journey to the underworld and ask for input from animal guides for some things, and for others, Hecate would be who I would call on. But another, I just can't say enough, she is connected to so many things. She is also attached to angels. So in the Greek magical papyri, which was a gathering of spells and charms and rituals and curses that were collected from the 2nd century BCE and up through I think like the 4th century CE. It is a great combination. She is the most invoked goddess in the book. She's everywhere because, again, she is awesome. She's just awesome, and you can call on her for so many things. But there are people, again, who were reaching out to the heavenly realms, and they were asking Hecate to send angels to guide them or heal them, or asking Hecate to send daemons, which are just like lesser spirits, not demons, daemons, that they would ask her to send these guys to say, again, to punish a criminal, to return property that was stolen, any of those things. So she's almost like at this, in energy fields, she just feels like she is at the top, and she has lots and lots of influence to kind of spread that out. So, but there's a connection that's way more modern that connects her to kind of being more dark. I mean, she is linked to herbs, pharmakeia, poisons, curses, absolutely true. There's some nasty curses out there that some early Greeks wrote, saying some pretty heinous shit. Wanting to murder their enemies and stuff. So like there are some of those connections, but actually the poisoning and like psychotropic and like kind of like dark aspects are way more modern additions to her. Most of her early herbal and witchery connections are pretty tame. So I think you could link to any of kind of those dark sides. Is it all comes down to your intention. So if you are a spiritual person but are maligned, I believe that you're capable of doing damage with the intentions that you're setting to harm people. So the few examples of that negativity, I think, almost gave her a bad rap. Like when I first looked into it, there are some of those connections. And I even remember very early on people being like, oh, like, I don't know, like she just had these negative connotations. But in historical references, she really is none of those things. Like, yes, just vengeance, but not, evil, but not evil, I guess I would say. So she has had, this is just another little interesting tidbit about her. So she has this really huge following, particularly in the 5th century. And but what was so interesting is that her most ardent followers and philosophers and people writing about her were all vegetarians, and they were actively writing to end animal sacrifice and saying like, listen, she's fine with like honey and fruits and vegetables and incense, okay, like let's not kill things anymore. And it was also really interesting, which I just didn't know, there were a lot of philosophers who believed in the transmigration of the soul, and they believed that eating meat was harming someone's path to enlightenment. So if you're eating meat, you're eating someone's soul's journey, which I have heard of in other cultures, but I had never heard that connection with the Greeks. So the very early, sacrifice of dogs, that seems to have died out. And though she is often surrounded by black dogs, and that's more kind of like her underworld Crossroads connection, that was phased out pretty early on. But the idea of leaving offerings at Crossroads continued. I actually read an excerpt that was like well into Christianity, and a Christian writer was like basically complaining like the hardest thing to break these pagans of was leaving food at Crossroads. Like they had like minimized like so many of these other attachments to pagan worship. But even though people were practicing Christians, they would still be like, well, I'm going to go out and leave this food for Hecate just in case. Like, just be on the safe side. I just thought was funny for like well into the future, she was still being at least venerated in those small ways when her temples weren't in use anymore. So what else do I have?
And with that, Lisa, the leaving food at Crossroads, is that sort of a light the way thing, or that's not a safe journey thing? That's sort of a life journey, make the right choices thing, is what I would, assume from that type of veneration, as you called it.
Yeah, I think so. And actually that was one thing, I was literally taking notes for this like up to a minute before I turned on Zoom. So maybe I'll have to do like a part 2 because there's a lot out here. But yes, I think the idea, because she is that guide and because so much of her is about that life journey and making choices where, again, she's opening the doors for you, she's lighting the way, and she is cutting the cords of the things that no longer serve you. So that triplicate and that crossroads, that branching pathway to leave an offering to her there is to just continuously call on that guidance in the steps that you're taking, that, or basically hoping that somebody is still watching out for you when you're making those choices in the day to day, and kind of creating those shifts. So leaving a food offering, I think, is still a useful, or is still a way to connect to her. As it just continued for so long, I think it's a nice symbol. And even like we talked about, it was like in other classes, but that idea of leaving that food offering, at Samhain, you're leaving that food for the ancestors and you're feeding them on their journey. It is similar. It feels similar to that. And I think still relevant today.
Imagining walking Danny in my neighborhood with like cashews in my pocket and like dropping a cashew at every crossroads for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and I just love that, because it's like those simple steps, but also, I mean, you have a black dog, and she is also, yeah, she's associated not just,
Oh,
yeah.
I was like, oh, remember Hecate.
Yeah, and particularly in many of her spells, not only are they black dogs, but they are bitches. They're female black dogs. She is awesome.
Again, spot on.
Okay, so
I just put a plate of food out. So food and nuts and fruit. So thank you for the inspiration.
awesome.
Right now?
Yes, right now.
My goodness.
I had you on mute, so I didn't make too much noise. I was listening to every word. Very interesting, of course. But I just thought I'd mention that I've got the plate out now.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, as I said, I maybe rushed this a little bit, but I love this idea because she's associated with the new moon. Many rituals and ceremonies to her by her priestesses would be performed on the new moon. Initiations would happen on the new moon. And there's actually historical reference to being initiated as a priestess of Hecate, where they would reenact that story of Persephone. So a priestess would have her two torches. She would lead the initiates down a darkened corridor, moving inward as though guiding Persephone into the underworld, that they would have this celebration, or they would meditate down deep in this cave. And then the return journey of guiding those initiates out would lead to that celebration and then becoming a priestess of Hecate. And that is all, again, in the dark of the moon, that connection to her most named aspect of being that guardian, the preceder and follower, and the torchbearer. So tonight, or very soon, as it's getting dark, way too early for my taste, and the new moon rising is a really great time to think about reaching out and making that connection to her.
I can't wait to bring my underworld dog with my modern torches, aka flashlights, and initiate myself into the priestesshood of Hecate tonight.
Yes. I'm so excited too. And so one thing as I was saying, I was going through these earlier journeys and realizing that I have been visited by some aspect of Hecate a lot of times. And before I knew about her, it was only on reflection going back saying, oh, that's a being that exists, like that I didn't have that connection to. And I think another thing for visualizations that is really helpful and would be part of that connecting to her is that she is associated with the dark pathway and a cave. So when she was on Earth and connected to Earth, her home is in a cave. Um, and every time I have seen her, I have either been at a darkened doorway going a dark stairway that is leading into darkness, or I walk into a cave. And all of those connections have taken place in those dark spaces. And it's really interesting for me because so much of my journey, I was very afraid of the dark. I was always afraid of the dark as a child. And as I continued this spiritual work, there were the first time I don't think it was her, I think it was a priestess, her, this energy, because as I went on, I felt like a heightening of energy. But this was like a long time ago before I knew anything about her. And I was being asked to come into the dark, to cross that threshold and go down into the dark. And it was in the form of a dream. And that's another way that she often speaks to people, is through dreams. She gives nightmares to people who deserve it. And she also sends prophetic dreams.
Yeah, what was her mom's name? Paulette asked a really great, like, practical spiritual question, and I'm a note-taking academic, and I wanted to remember what her mom's
Yes.
name was.
She is
First
a
mom.
Let me just make sure I have her. Yes, Asteria. So Asteria. And she is a goddess of prophetic dreams, night sky, and stars. And all of those ended up falling on Hecate. Let's see here. What was I just? Oh, so connecting to her. And at that time, this was very early on, I was standing at the top of the stairs and I was like, I'm not going down there. It's dark down there. It's really, I can't go down there. And I was like back in, and I could not do it. And I remember thinking, like, if I just had a light, I could go there, but I can't do this. And it's so interesting to me that as you progress and as I've learned and increased that journey, that was part of my process, was then having a light. There was a time when I was placed in front of that dark place, and then I looked and I realized I had a light, and it was okay for me to move forward. And so that feels like that connection to her as well, where she is not giving you the answers. She wasn't there and saying, like, this isn't scary, like, here, I'm showing you this. It was like, no, this is hard work. Like, this is something that's difficult, and I'm here, but also it comes onto you to make those steps. And in that process, like, my relationship with her has grown in, so that over time, I have actually felt like a merging connection to her. And I almost feel like at some point, like, maybe in the past I was a priestess, I had like this kind of like past life connected to, as well as, and using that old knowledge and that history to heal myself now. And so I guess I just can't speak enough to the power of her and that guidance. Now, I think she will show herself in many ways. And if you have the sense that you've connected to this and she appears to you different than that she does to me, then that is what it is. But I will say, I've always seen her with very long black hair. And most often, even though this isn't something that's, written about or associated with her in literary references, is that she has taloned hands. So her fingers become claws like bird feet. And I've always seen that. And in the journey when I merged with her, I had those hands, and I was able to cut something out of myself. So again, that might not be something that how that happens for you, but I just have now know, if I journey and then I am standing in this cave place, I know that she has something to teach me. And now it's not it doesn't feel scary. It feels like, oh yes, like I get to do the next thing. I can take this next step, and I can, you know, here's another way that I am releasing something that is still binding me, and kind of growing in that personal strength, I think is, for me, what she can give. So she's known as, like, she's kind of this medicine. She has the connection of the curative herbal medicines of the natural world. But so she is kind of like, she is medicine for your mind, body, and soul, right? She's guiding your soul. She gives, you know, she's kind of tough love, and also is like real physical healing, through how you eat, and how you're living, which I just, I don't know, clearly I'm a big fan. Let's
Oh,
see.
can I ask you a question there?
Yes.
Are there any things, like it's the new moon, and I guess where I am, which is in Maine at the moment, I don't think there's going to be any visibility here because it's a little. So is there anything that you recommend that we do for the beginning of the new moon? I mean, you just call on her, or is there, I've got my lights, my flowers, and my fruit and nuts.
Yes.
Got that already. So is there anything else that you might suggest? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So, the anything that is like attaches to those common associations, I have done this before on the new moon, like to her, is just candle, key, knife. So literally can be a key off your key ring, a candle or a light, and a butter knife. It doesn't matter, but I tend to kind of like the visual representations and in ceremony and ritual.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, I love that.
So set up a little altar. You can put your candle, your key, your knife outside. You can put it with your food offering. And then simply, like, as you're reaching out and calling on her, like, light the candle and ask her for that guidance. Like, Hecate, light my path, guide my feet, show me the direction that I should be going in. And then with your key, you know, Hecate, unlock those doors that need to be opened. Or maybe lock those doors behind me. we like don't have room for anymore. Like, we don't need that. And then also with the knife, like, reveal to me what needs to be cut away. What is binding me that no longer serves? What is that thing that is removed that helps you with your light move forward on that path? And I think that's like the simplest and most direct. Again, if you can visualize you're outside under the night sky and she's connected to that, or even if you're toasty in your house, it doesn't matter. But I would visualize a pathway and cave. Or again, if it's outside and night, I think either of those are fine. But thinking about the three, the candle, the key, the knife, are your armor. They're kind of like those protective implements that are helping you take those steps forward. Also interesting, just that, again, because she's called on for everything, that one of the things that her followers would do would be to visualize themselves in armor of light, which I just think is so cool. Like we in modern day, like, we bubble up, right? You think about shielding yourself against negativity, and that's a really common modern spiritual practice, that you're like protecting yourself from negative energy. You're sending it away with love and light, and you're protecting yourself and keeping yourself safe. And then there are these references from so long ago where her followers were also envisioning themselves empowered by her. And she, in one reference, is goddess in full armor and with weapons. So I mean, she is a real badass. And so in if you're feeling like you're struggling and not finding the way, not only do you have the light, the key, and the sword, but to visualize yourself in her white armor, in that armor of light, and with your weapons, to move forward. I think that's just kind of general calling her energy to kind of to bolster you and give you strength and courage.
I
And
love
then,
that. I've got them all out now. I've got the knife, the key, the candle. And do you do this right? I know, right? Do you do this right at right when it becomes dark? I mean, is that the best time you think to do it?
I think any time tonight is absolutely fine. As soon as the sun sets, it is the new moon, and you could do it. You could do it right away, or save it earlier on. And then another thing, almost like as a follow up, which could be really nice, would be to tomorrow night, as the light is returning. Right, you have planted these seeds. You're asking for this guidance of what are the next steps in your path. What are the things that you need to know? What do you release? What do you need to open? And that you have the wisdom to find your way, right? And then as the light is returning, you've planted those seeds, and kind of saying that light returning into the world is that growth of that idea. And maybe just an offering of thanks as that continues. There was something specific that was another connection to another thing of the night following the full moon. Maybe it was about initiation, that you were initiated on that new moon, and then the following day there would be like a secondary celebration of that, like return, or not return, of beginning of taking the next step on your journey. But honestly, you can't do this the wrong way. It's going to be what feels right to you, and what feels right in the moment. And just asking those questions and asking for that guidance is opening yourself up to get those insights that you need. This is just true in spiritual work altogether, but particularly, as I said, my own journey with Hecate in those early days when I was too afraid, and now I am empowered after years, and I feel like I have that relationship. Is you don't get anything you can't handle. So in the beginning, I was basically told, like, I'm here, and I'm here when you're ready. And I wasn't ready, but the offer stood. And that this energy, that this being, whatever it is actually like, is there for you. And that as you take these steps, and it becomes easier, that you have that guide, whether or not it's something that you can immediately do in the moment. So any connection that you're making, whatever you get is going to be what you need to continue on. And if that story grows and changes over time, it's because you're ready to hear it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, doing that tonight. I've already got everything all set up, so looking forward.
Awesome.
Thank you.
This is, I don't know how people feel with like rhyme or anything. Like I did more of that earlier, of like actually having, again, to kind of get into a mindset and have like something that is short or like kind of like repetitive was helpful for me, or almost like writing out a prayer. I've done that. But, now more often than not, I just say like, what do I need to know? That's my go-to. What do I need to know? Right. And then and wait for those answers. But I wrote this a long time ago as kind of again, that idea of making that connection. But Hecate, when I doubt, show me my strength. Light the crossroads before me that I may see my way. Queen of transitions, guardian at the gates, bless my journeys through dark and dawn and day and dusk. Help me to find balance within myself, dark and light, above, below, before, behind. As a coin cannot have one side, I am not whole without light and dark. and that idea of that balance, and also her connection to all of these things. So she's most often, again, her priestesses, because of that story of Persephone, is around night, but also she has so many connections to gods of the sun, and we know she travels the earth and can go into the sea, and she's in heaven, and she can go into the underworld. So really, at any time, if you're seeking that guidance, there's no bad time to reach out and ask that, because you're just calling on a different facet of that energy that she can give.
That sounds great. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts or things you want to throw out?
Absolutely fascinating, Lisa. You are an amazing teacher, really. I love your passion too, because I know you do believe it, and it feels good to hear it. Very, really helpful. I'm gonna really do something tonight too. I hadn't done that before, but I feel inspired to now. Yeah, it's good, really good.
Yeah, I think it was great, really very, very helpful, and actually very timely for me.
Yes, yeah, really timely. I was thinking about things as you were talking about how it might apply, you know, and bringing in that energy. That wasn't one that I had before, so that was good.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear it. So, well, I think we've been about an hour. I guess we can wrap up, but please, if anybody has questions for me as you go forward, or any other ideas you want to run by me, absolutely reach out. You can send me an email, and I can give you other thoughts. There's an awesome website, which is keepingherkeys.com, which is just an absolute treasure trove of information and videos. All of my history, like, as I said, and this is not a negative, there are many connections to that have become modernized, right? And so people are still worshiping her and following her, but there are new additions because people are reaching out in a different way. But all of the history, the literary references, all those historical things I got from a book about her, which actually cites every Greek and Egyptian source where her name is mentioned, and kind of talks about all of those ties, which is just super interesting. If you have an interest in that, I can send you the info of what the book is. But that website, just in general, for other ideas of connecting, I've just kind of started looking into it myself, but I think it's a really good spot to check out.
Love that. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. You're so welcome.
So
Can't
much.
wait for the next title. Yeah. Next class.
Yeah, I'm thinking on that actually. I kind of want to just do a dabbling into meditation and spiritual connection across culture, like how culture influences how you meditate and what the purpose of meditation is.
That would be great. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about that. So I'll keep you posted when I have more info on that. But as I said, please reach out and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll get this turned into a YouTube video, and you are welcome to share it with anybody you think would like it.
Perfect. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving. Stay
Bye.
safe. Bye.